What's going on, guys? Welcome back to We Need to Talk. Some of the topics we're going to get into in today's episode is, did Jean Grey sexually assault Spider-Man in Spider-Man Brand New Day? Inde Navarrette's turned down Heat 2 in order to star in Marvel's X-Men, and people have a lot of thoughts on it. Marvel just assigned us some homework of the 15 projects to watch before Avengers Doomsday, and it's kind of weird, and the Michael Jackson movie sequel will apparently be addressing the allegations. Kind of. So we're going to be getting into all of that. As usual, timestamps are down below if you want to jump around. And let's not waste any more time and begin. So Marvel recently put out a list of the 15 projects that you should watch in the lead up to Doomsday. And I'm not going to lie, the list is pretty weird. So we're going to go through it. We're going to talk about what they included, what they did not include, and discuss. So starting off, they have the original X-Men movie, which makes sense. We know that the original Fox X-Men are in Doomsday, so it makes sense to have the origin story where you get introduced to all those characters. Then they also have X2, which is fine, I guess. Like, it does introduce a few more characters, but when you consider some of the X-Men films that are not on this list, X2 being here is a little bit more surprising, because as a story, it is very standalone. And if you really want to know the whole story of what happened with these X-Men characters, it's kind of weird to have X2 on here, but then not finish off the trilogy with X-Men The Last Stand, regardless of that film's quality. And then, of course, Days of Future Past, which is one of the most important X-Men films in terms of what happens in that film, how it resets the timeline of that entire universe, is not included on this list, which again, it just kind of seems random to leave that off while having X2 on here. Next up, they have Captain America, the First Avenger. And of course, this introduces us to Steve, so on paper, it does make sense. But why do we need the origin of Captain America if you're not also going to include the origin of Iron Man or like the first Thor movie? Again, a theme you're going to find on this list, random. Then we have the first Avengers movie, which makes sense. We're bringing the Avengers together, but then we skip over to Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. Now, Infinity War Endgame being here, I understand, but in between the first Avengers and Infinity War, I'm very surprised that they don't have Civil War. Because I can understand skipping over Age of Ultron, a film that I do think is quite overrated, but I will admit, in the grand scheme of things, not the most consequential Marvel film, but Civil War is the movie that breaks up the Avengers and very much sets up where the whole team is going into Infinity War, so a pretty bad omission as far as I'm concerned. And then, of course, I understand you can't have every single movie on this list, but considering some of the ones that we do have on here, it's interesting to me that they don't have some other Phase 3 movies, something that introduces us to certain characters like Doctor Strange or even a Guardians of the Galaxy in here. Then moving on to post-Endgame, we have the Loki TV show. And this one makes total sense. It deals with the multiverse, it deals with timelines, and given how that show ends off, this is one of the more obvious picks where it does feel like, yes, you should watch Loki going into Doomsday, because the way that that show ends, some pretty big stuff happens. It is interesting to note, though, that Loki is the only Marvel Disney Plus show on here, which I get. Marvel does not want to make its fans have to go and binge through seasons of TV, but WandaVision, I kind of think should have been on here. Especially given that later on in this list, they do have Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which is pretty much a direct follow-up to WandaVision. Not having it on here, it's kind of baffling, if I'm going to be honest. Then we have Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which makes sense. It introduces us to the Shang-Chi character, and we know he's going to be in Doomsday. Then we have Spider-Man No Way Home, which again deals with the multiverse, although I will say I don't see how No Way Home is the most consequential narratively to watch in terms of setting up Doomsday, especially because none of the Spider-Man crew is going to be in Doomsday. It does feel like a hint that some of the characters from Spider-Man No Way Home, specifically the other Spider-Man, could perhaps be in this movie. I'm just saying. Then you have Black Panther Wakanda Forever, which I think is a great pick considering we've seen Wakanda and Talokan are obviously both in Doomsday. Captain America Brave New World, which establishes where Sam Wilson is at with that character, and also establishes that he's putting together a new Avengers team, which is going to be a main thread going into Doomsday. Now, Deadpool and Wolverine is included in here, which makes sense as a film that's dealing with the multiverse and all of that, but it is a bit of a funny pick considering technically Deadpool and Wolverine, Ryan Reynolds, Hugh Jackman, are still not confirmed to be in this movie, but I think we all have a feeling that they're going to be in here. But again, it's also weird to have Deadpool and Wolverine on this list and then not have Logan, because in so many ways, to understand what's happening in Deadpool and Wolverine, you kind of need to have seen Logan. And this pick also makes sense because Gambit from Deadpool and Wolverine's movie, Channing Tatum, we know is in Doomsday, reprising that role. Then we have Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which makes total sense. It's setting up multiverse, it's setting up incursions, and the movie ends with Doctor Strange going off with a certain someone to deal with problems in the multiverse. The only question mark here is that Benedict Cumberbatch is still not confirmed to be in this movie, so perhaps this will only come around in Secret Wars. And then the last two they have on here are the most obvious ones: Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four First Steps, which introduces us to two of the teams that are going to be central to this film. Now, the most obvious omission that people are talking about is the Marvels not being on this list, given that the end of that movie literally has a character transported off to another universe, which feels like maybe the most direct setup that we've had for Doomsday. But I think Marvel is just trying to put that to the side because they know pretty much no one saw that film, and they don't really want to build off of the story beats from that movie. Now, overall, guys, when it comes to this list, I don't think this is something that is meant to be taken too seriously. I just think it's Marvel doing a fun thing on Disney Plus saying, here's your countdown to Doomsday, enjoy. Like, obviously, there is no version of this list with only 15 projects that could ever properly cover the things that you need to watch going into this movie. And I'm also sure that Marvel is aware that a bunch of people showing up to this film are not going to do the homework, and so I'm sure they're going to make the movie in a way that even if you have barely seen any Marvel movies since Endgame, you're still going to be able to follow along with the story just fine. But I think if you are someone who wants to catch up, the most important projects to watch are probably Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four, because they introduce two of the main teams going into this movie, as well as having post-credit scenes that directly go into this film. Then probably Captain America Brave New World, to see where Sam and his whole Avengers team is coming from. I would say then the Loki TV show, and finally, I would probably say to do a refresh of Avengers Endgame, considering we are bringing back Steve. We saw Steve with a child in the trailers, so this movie clearly is building off the ending of Avengers Endgame, so it's probably good to have that fresh in your mind. But what do you guys think about Marvel's homework list for Avengers Doomsday? Whatever your thoughts are, let me know down in the comments. Now moving on, we have something that I wanted to touch on very quickly. I know I'm a couple days late to this, but Inde Navarrette reportedly turned down a chance to be in Michael Mann's Heat 2 in order to be in X-Men as Rogue. Now, from the reports, it's not entirely clear whether she turned this down or if she had already signed on to X-Men, so she literally couldn't do it because of scheduling conflicts. But the bottom line is, Inde Navarrette is doing X-Men, not doing Michael Mann's Heat 2. And when it comes to this discussion of whether this is the right decision, it's tough to say, because unlike YouTube, you can't A/B test your life, okay? You can't put in two titles, see which one's performing better, and then pick that one. We don't get to do that. And so there will always be people that if she does this X-Men movie and it flops and doesn't go anywhere, kind of like what happened with the Eternals a couple years ago, there will always be those who say, if she had done Heat 2, she would have been in this acclaimed prestige film, and it would have been the right move for her. But again, that would be very easy to say in retrospect, but as of right now, the position that Inde Navarrette is currently in, I think this is 100% the right move, because while Michael Mann's Heat 2 would have probably given her a chance at a little bit more prestige and awards claim than being in an X-Men movie, and it would have allowed her to act alongside two of the greatest actors of their generation with Leonardo DiCaprio and Christian Bale, I still don't think that compares to the opportunity in front of her with X-Men. Because if all goes well with X-Men, she will be a starring character in one of the most popular movie franchises inside of the most popular movie franchise of all time for at least the next 10 years. Now, I'm sure Michael Mann's Heat 2 is going to have some buzz. I'm sure it's going to be very good, simply based on the fact that Leonardo DiCaprio's in it, and Leo is very good at picking scripts. But the upside of being in X-Men, I just think is so much bigger. And the main argument here is that Michael Mann's Heat 2 is almost guaranteed to be very high quality, whereas with Marvel, given what's happened over the past few years, there's a higher chance of things going wrong. And while I can understand where people are coming from, I'm actually going to have to disagree, because I think Inde Navarrette is coming into a Marvel that has found its way. Like, if you look at Marvel over the past few years, they have returned back to quality over quantity, and their last series of projects have all been received exceptionally well. Thunderbolts was very positively received, Fantastic Four First Steps, Spider-Man Brand New Day, Daredevil Born Again Season 2, Wonder Man, like everything they've been putting out recently has been extremely well received. And given that they've got Jake Schreier, who did Thunderbolts, doing this X-Men movie, I think it's very likely that Inde is going to be in a successful, well-received version of the X-Men in a thriving Marvel universe for at least a decade, And I just don't think that's an opportunity you turn down. But what do you guys think about Inde Navarrette's decision to star in X-Men instead of Michael Mann's Heat 2? Whatever you guys think, let me know down in the comments. Now, the Michael Jackson movie sequel is going to be going more into the child abuse allegations against Michael Jackson. At least, that is the hopes of its star, Jafar Jackson. So recently, Jafar Jackson said that the Michael sequel will give more insight into the child abuse allegations against Michael and let his voice be heard. Now, we all know one of the big questions about the Michael sequel is how are they going to tackle some of the allegations, some of the darker stuff that happens later on in his life. Because from what we heard about the first film, they actually attempted to cover some of this stuff, but they literally couldn't for legal reasons, which made a lot of us question, well, how do you even do a sequel if you're not allowed to touch on any of those things? And now, the star of the film, Jafar Jackson, is saying, quote, I think the second film will give even more insight from his point of view. And he went on to say that the problem with a lot of the allegations are that they're always coming from somebody else, and that a lot of the allegations are mainly driven by an agenda. Now, he also went on to say that he is the star of the movie and is not writing the script, so a lot of his words here are actually more what he hopes to see in the movie as opposed to what he actually knows will be there. But I do think it's interesting, and I think this is how they're gonna go with it. I'm sure that they will bring up the allegations because it would be too ridiculous not to in a film that is covering the second part of his career. But of course, at the exact same time, this is obviously not going to be a movie that paints Michael Jackson in a bad light. This is not a movie that is going to suggest, however you feel about this topic, that Michael Jackson was actually abusing these kids. I'm sure the movie will show us maybe how he struggled with these allegations and how it affected him personally, but based on what we saw in the first film, which presented this very squeaky clean image of Michael Jackson, I don't expect this movie to go in depth with this stuff at all. I think it's just going to cover the bare minimum that is needed to allow the story to flow and make some sort of sense. But I do think, just like the first film, it's going to be focused on primarily being a celebration of Michael Jackson as an artist, his music, and his impact on pop culture. But what do you guys think? Do you like what you're hearing about the Michael Jackson sequel? Do you hate what you're hearing about the Michael sequel? Whatever you guys think, let me know down in the comments. All right, and finally, the big one. The topic I am most interested to talk about today: did Jean Grey sexually assault Spider-Man in Brand New Day? Now, of course, the scene I'm referring to is when Jean Grey has taken control of MJ's body, and while pretending to be MJ, she kisses Peter, only to reveal she's just torturing him for the fun of the game. And what's interesting about this discussion is that this is not something that actually occurred to me after first watching the film, and more interestingly, it's not something that anyone seems to really be talking about online, which in a year where we've had a movie like Obsession, and there has been so much talk online from the movie space about consent and things of that nature, it is interesting to see that basically no one has talked about that in relation to this scene. It wasn't until one of my friends actually brought this up that I thought, oh yeah, did Jean Grey actually assault him in this scene? Now, I think the answer is clearly yes, and I do think if the genders were flipped around here, people would have been a lot quicker to identify this. Like, I'm sure that if it was a male telepath doing this to a woman superhero, there would be a lot more discussion around the scene. And by the way, that includes me too. Like, I didn't even register this as being assault done to Peter, which is fascinating because I 100% think I would have if the genders were flipped. But what is especially interesting about this is that it's not like the movie isn't aware of the problematic nature of the scene with regards to consent. Because later on in the movie, Peter has a moment where he specifically tells MJ, like, hey, when you were possessed, I thought it was you, we kissed, and I just thought you should know. So the movie is aware of the problem around consent, but it's only aware of it in one direction, and it doesn't point any of that focus back towards Peter, who was also manipulated in this scene. Like, Peter has the moment where he apologizes to MJ for doing something that, of course, he didn't even know about, but the movie doesn't give equal scrutiny to the offense committed by Jean Grey, which is far worse. Like, there's no moment at the end of the film where Jean Grey goes, oh yeah, Peter, that thing I did earlier where I pretended to be your ex-girlfriend and then I kissed you, that was kind of messed up. Sorry about that. Like, Jean Grey just doesn't apologize for this. The movie does other things to show her coming around. Like, at the end, she does help save Peter's life by keeping him alive and breathing for him while he's in the hospital, but there is no acknowledgement of what she did in that moment. And so I do hope that going forward, that this, and just more broadly speaking, a lot of the stuff that Jean did in this movie does get addressed. Because while I've said in some of my past videos that I don't think Jean is too evil in this movie, or she's past the point where they could do a redemption arc for her in the future, future, I do think they clearly need a redemption arc. I think it would be a shame if they just kind of moved on from all of the stuff she did in this film, where she, like, literally walked an old man into traffic. By the way, for no reason at all, okay? Completely for the fun of the game. Like, if you're looking for your sister, walking an old man into traffic has nothing to do with that. Making out with Peter literally brought her no closer to finding her sister. And so I do hope that when we see her in the X-Men film, that a lot of the story focuses on Jean really reflecting on some of the crazy shit she did in the past, and perhaps allow that to be her arc in the first X-Men film, where it's just focused on being a redemption, because I think that would be a really cool storytelling opportunity, and overall, would kind of suck if Marvel just moves on from this. But yeah, what do you guys think of this topic of Jean kissing Spider-Man in Brand New Day? Do you think it's assault? Do you view it a bit differently? Whatever you guys think, let me know down below. But alright guys, that pretty much covers everything for this episode of We Need to Talk. If you like this video and you want to watch another, click somewhere on the screen to do that, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.